to Insight Special Edition Thought of the Day, where we do not review a video that I, I hosted or did or participated in and talk about the insight to that insight or why I was there. But we're going to talk about a everyday challenge or perspective that we have to keep in mind so that we can be the best selves we can be. And so before I get started, I do want to shout out Bitcoin Magazine, I believe the oldest, most established news media, if you will, that focuses on thought leadership, information, and everything Bitcoin as far as trends and things of that nature. So I do want to shout them out. In that, I want to shout out my partner and friend, Robert Savage, entrepreneur, real estate developer, who does great things, former professional athlete, doing great things in the southeast region of the United States. So thank you for that introduction. And through that, I also want to shout out Coach Kevin Walker, who serves as the Community Relations Director for WACO Team USA Kickboxing, the United States of America governing body for all things kickboxing, domestic and abroad. And so I want to shout out Rob Zabilski, President of Team USA Kickboxing, WACO being the World Association of Kickboxing Organizations. Make sure you check out those links to get more information. And in that, I want to shout out, and of course, Rob Zabilski, President of Team USA Kickboxing, as well as his administration. But in there, I do want to make sure we shout out Team USA Nashville, which is the promotional company, all things private and community-based, combat related, in the state of Tennessee and growing. Make sure you click those links and follow that information and trends there. So in this particular case, we're going to go ahead and jump into the conversation and why this everyday challenge and perspective is something that we have to just keep in mind. And so we're going to talk about leadership and why leadership is essential. And so if you know my work of managing relationships, leveraging relationships for lead generation, more awareness, cross promotion, brand, all different reasons, both government related, business and community, you'll know that I'm around various perspectives, various ideas, various ethnicities, various cultures. And so it's very important as I go through of transforming brands and communities and individuals, including myself, that you have to know how things work and how things have to be cohesive for, at the minimum, peace to come. And that could be for your business affairs, commercially or personally. And so I want to talk about leadership development and why it's essential to maintain peace in economics and on the social side, because that's going to decrease as much risk as possible. And so in that, we do have this bad boy color coded, especially when it comes to the blue here, and just basically being a seed of information. Where we're going to plant that seed. This is pretty much our input. And then the green here is what I would call the water, which is nourishing and nourishment, and it's going to be our process. And our red here is pretty much our takeaways and our outputs. So let's jump right into it. So first of all, leadership and why it's essential. You know why it came to my attention. I'm around so many different cultures and perspectives that I'm realizing, especially at this time, if we as individuals first do not focus on being the best we can be as ourselves and for those around us, at this point, it's just going to be too much challenges that's unnecessary. That's the reality. Too much challenges that's unnecessary. And so in that, what does that look like? These are just not all the answers, some simple points, some simple ideas that we can think about when it comes to the seed, watering, the harvest, the input, the process, the output, the planning, the nurturing, and the takeaway. And so when it comes to leadership and why it's essential, keep in mind, you set the example. We're always trying to get to the foundation of it. You set the example. So knowing that, it starts with you. I believe the word said, naked alone you came in, naked alone you shall leave, if you will. And in that, know that you have to put some work in yourself. So that is first setting the example. And keep in mind that everyone is watching. That's why one of the reasons why it's important to know that you set the example. Everyone's watching. Even when they don't know they're watching, and there's a lot of people intentionally watching for a number of different reasons. And so and it's hard to do and it's not necessary, and I was told as you get older, it's like, forget it, but you always want to, as best you can, especially in managing relationships, hold yourself blameless. So that means you got to be aware of people's accountabilities and expectations and standards, and as a person of service, always try to stay ahead of that, to just keep peace. And this is what we're talking about here, and keeping balance. And that's a skill set you have to have if you're an entrepreneur, community relations specialist, or anything of that nature. And so just know that people are watching, the world is watching, and so therefore you have to lead by example, meaning you have to do the work. You have to set the example, and that's going to require action. These are things that I have to do myself every day, and I'm talking to myself at this time. But this is Insight into Insight, special edition, thought of the day. And just know that, especially when it comes to children, respectfully, at the minimum, they're going to copy and imitate their elders, whatever the elders look like. And so we have to give these children enough time to properly develop, respectfully, to critically think, and know their values and their behavior patterns. Know thyself, if you will. So knowing that, children are watching, and the world is watching, our friends, our peers, everybody's watching, we don't have to care about that. That's nobody's problem, it's nobody's business. But if you're looking at the larger picture of when I leave here, if you will, what did I leave for the next generation? Because it's very important to know that you're here now. Somebody at that time did not know that what they did affected you at this time, affects me at this time. And it's going to help me or hurt me based upon the timeline I was placed in. And so knowing that, what is your actions and what are you doing to help not only the next generation, but try to contribute to the generations to come of this planet, of all this, that's allowing us to do what we do right now. And so therefore, know that the children need time to develop, and so they're watching. We owe them sustainable training. We owe the next generation sustainable training because the ancestors before us owed us that, because we got to keep it going strong. And the question I have for you, and leave in the comments as well, is how do you feel, how has your ancestors impact your life today? I think impacted. How has your ancestors impacted your life today? How has your ancestors made an impact in your life today? And that's a question I want you to ask yourself. The life that you're living today, the ancestors that came before you, how has their experience impacted what you're going through today, if at all? And there's no right or wrong answer. Just leave it in the comments if you don't mind, when it comes to your ancestors. And if you have a deep thought about that, you'll see that, it was important for them to do what they did or had to go through, or us to learn from, and whatever they went through for us to be here, we have to have that same mindset for the next generation. So you set the example. Everyone's watching, including these youngins out here. And we want to also be mindful of the choices that we make and how it impacts tomorrow. So therefore, the harvest or the output or the takeaway is leadership affects the well-being of others. Now, if I didn't, it's supposed to be an E there, forgive me. I just realized that. I had to double check and see. But the reality situation is you don't have to start to be great. No, you don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great. So keep that in mind. You don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great. So therefore, if it's an E there, just put in the comments, and we'll keep it going. But leadership affects the well-being of others. So knowing that you set the example, knowing that others are affected by your actions, by your example, and therefore I wish and thankful in advance for you to have the courage that's necessary, to include myself, to continue to do what needs to be done when it comes to leadership, and knowing why it's essential for us to sustain. Second thing, of what leadership is and why it's essential, you want to reproduce a producer mindset. you want to reproduce a producer mindset. And that's so important because you have to, what I would say is keep it moving. You have to keep it moving, but peace be still at the same time. Meaning you have to have balance. So leadership is setting the example, but doing it in a way where you have balance because you're aware that you have to keep it moving like the water. But at the same time, peace at the same time. If you break those words down, peace be still. And so you have to have balance by first knowing yourself. How can you have balance if you don't know what it is you're balancing? And knowing yourself is both physical and non-physical, if you will. And so therefore, having a mindset or being able to reproduce a mindset of producers. Let's jump into that real quick. A producer is something or someone that creates. And again, you have to keep it moving. So you have to create. And you don't have to, but that's something that humans do. And you want to create for, again, the children. Worst case, you want to, for the children. And so in that, you have to create and contribute your part in love, in peace. But in that, you have to know when the creation has to stop for its necessary reasons. And that comes from knowing, again, who you are, what makes you tick, where you come from, visualizing where you're going, and going through that process of what that looks like. And so therefore, the harvest or the output or takeaway here when it comes to producing a producer mindset is start with self-leadership. And that basically falls back into setting the example. You have to first set the example and therefore start with yourself. Because that's the greatest example. And that's the great example anybody's going to more than likely judge you on. Yourself, so watch what you say. Don't say too much because you're going to be held accountable to it. They say the wisest ones are usually the quietest ones, So respectfully keep that in mind. Third thing to take away of leadership and why is essential is respectfully, this is a touchy situation, to combat social engineering. So therefore, the first two situations dealt with yourself as a human, and it dealt with your fellow human beings. But in that, these fellow human beings and yourself have to live in an environment respectfully, something around them, something that makes their day-to-day go. And in that environment, respectfully, there's this thing called, social activity, if you will. And respectfully, as one gets to master the art of various forms, you can actually manipulate respectfully certain situations, and one of those situations could be social. And it could be what one would be called engineering. And look those things up. Leave a comment of what social engineering is. Always we're going to be respectful of what we leave in the comments, but ultimately leave a comment what social engineering is, your thoughts, but ultimately you want to combat social engineering. And why is that so important? Because in this case, social engineering usually has to do with group, has to do with masses. And if you know how to handle that, leverage that, manipulate that, even create that, then you can have respectfully situations going to your favor and not to the best overall interest. And that's not saying it's right or wrong, that's just what it is, respectfully. And so therefore, it's important if you're looking to be a leader and to always look at every angle and look for win-win deals. You want to make sure that you are thinking for yourself. You want to make sure that, and to think for yourself, you have to, again, be in touch and know yourself. And one of the things you have to know that exists, especially within yourself, is your emotions. So you have to be intelligently aware of your emotions, thus emotional intelligence, or EQ. And so when it comes to becoming a leader and why that's essential, and to combat social engineering, our third focus is because we want to think for ourselves and be emotionally intelligent in what we do. And that's going to help us in our other previous focuses. And keep in mind, respectfully, this concludes myself, either you control yourself or someone may control you. And that could be just based upon what someone says to you that gets you off, or what you see on them. Respectfully, I saw someone say, I saw someone that had this on and I just was ready to lose it. And I can understand, I get it, and you have probably the right to do so. But the reality of the situation is, and I can say this for myself, respectfully, unless it's true, integral harm to someone, again, to you, the children, that's just injustice, if you will, folks have a right to do what and have what they want. If it's legal within the boundaries, that's why it's important, especially if you live in a democracy, assume it's integral, you want to make sure that you're voting and going through that process at the local level. That's where it's the most effective. If the local is strong, then everything over time will be as strong, at the minimum. So therefore, at the end of the day, you ultimately want to either control yourself, or someone may control you. And keep that in mind. And, with that, there are things outside of your control, and you still have to deal with it. Now, I'll say it again. There's things outside of your control, especially when it comes to either control yourself or someone or something may control you, as far as, again, there's this thing, I think it's called chaos theory. I could be wrong. I forgot but it's where basically someone or something is provoking you so much, and just right in your face or right in your personal space, provoking you, either doing things to the point where you snap and do something that justifies them to retaliate and be dignified in a way, and they're the ones that socially engineered that situation. I believe it's chaos theory, but I could be wrong. Forgive my ignorance. Leave what that is, what that's called in the comments, if you don't mind. And this is why it's always good to fact check, to make sure you're doing research on anybody, including myself. And so, knowing that you have to control yourself, or something may control you, and knowing that some things are outside of your control, we should always be aware of the law of possibilities, as in, worst case, all things are possible. So knowing that, and really being aware and accepting that, you can go through life a little less stressed, because you know that this is what life is. But as a leader, and this is where you got to know yourself, that certain things are there to know that with a little bit of work and faith, it'll work out in his favor. We'll get into that in a minute. And speaking of that, that just actually takes me to 2 Corinthians 13:5. And it says, in part, examine yourself to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourself. Examine yourself. And I took that for me as in to know yourself. And I believe we talked about that in the second sector there. To reproduce a producer mindset, you have to keep it moving, but peace be still, meaning you have to have balance by first knowing yourself. Therefore, examine yourself to see whether you are in the faith. And I see the faith being, of course, things that can't be seen, but knowing that through grace, things will work out. Make sure you click my link to find out my story. We all have a story, but it's going to be examining yourself to put the work in, so to see whether you are in the faith. Not around it, not beside it, but you're in that thing. That's what she said, and therefore you are walking accordingly. Respect to the office, Michael Scott and Steve Corral. Reach out to me, maybe we can do lunch. So therefore, test yourself. I'll read that again. Examine yourself to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourself. Yes, you're going to test yourself, but we know that there are things outside of your control that you have to deal with, which means that you're going to test yourself, and others will test you as well. Other things outside of yourself. And so therefore, no, others will test you. And so therefore, you have to know that once you pass the test and you're able to master the test, it's important for you to teach the test. And therefore, you have to reproduce a producer mindset, which is our second pillar here, which starts with self-leadership that is set by the example that you make. And that's leadership, and knowing that ultimately the children, ultimately ourselves today, our friends and families, and those that we don't know, as a kind tomorrow and now, is essential to be aware that peace is needed in order for good business to happen. Because with challenges, it's bad for business. Financially, PR-wise, physically, everything. especially so we want to, and we're getting to a point as human beings that we should be wise enough to have a conversation and look for a win-win deal. Now, I'm not saying everything is a win-win, but there's certain things that could be avoided, and as long as we focus on setting the example, producing a producer mindset, and just respectfully thinking for ourselves with emotional intelligence, we're able to be one step closer to where we need to be. So make sure if you want to follow my work, there's a link there that you can click where there's actually a free 5-point checklist that you will receive of how to build and to manage working relationships from scratch, like actually getting out the bed and say, I want to build a long-term working relationship to leverage that relationship for myself and others. 5 steps broken down. You get that free checklist, and then I also have a link there where you're able to take a free 35-minute course on the actual steps and notes and things of that nature of how to build and manage working relationships to leverage for yourself and others to the point of making money. So check, and it's just the basics. How do you do it when you wake up from the bed, wake up from the bed and get your day started. Make sure you click that link. Also, there's a link there if you're looking for some advising services on everything community relations, business development, customer service, if you will, and executive leadership management related, as well as any outsourcing regarding marketing in the areas of community relations, business development, and public relations overall. And thank you for liking and subscribing on the work that we're doing. There should be a button there as well if you're looking to speak on, if you have a topic in the areas of community relations, which is increasing your customer base, or business development, community relations, which is increasing your presence in the community, and business development, which is increasing your customer base. Anything of those areas you want to speak, you want to have me talk on, feel free to click the link, fill the form out, and go ahead and put a subject there, and maybe we can go ahead and get into it. In the meantime, congratulations for your success. This has been, this is Insight to Insight, special edition, thought of the day. Make sure you stay following what we're doing as far as Insight to Insight, as I have some really great videos that I participated in as far as giving insight, and watch the video and actually break down that insight away from and outside of the camera. And so make sure you follow. Congrats in advance for your continued success, and see you at the top.